Arriving here and now, maybe gently closing the eyes if that is safe and available to you in this moment. And arriving in whatever way you feel intuitively called to. So maybe that's getting comfortable in the body, finding a posture, a position that is comfortable for you now. Arriving in the breath, noticing and letting the breath be exactly as it is. Arriving in the space that you are in right now, wherever you are seated. Allowing yourself to orient in this environment. And connecting now with the heart space, the chest area, and simply allowing awareness to focus in on what the chest and the heart feel like now. If there are any sensations present, any energies. If there was a color to your heart in this moment, simply noticing what that might be. Allowing your inner senses to engage and observe with compassionate curiosity. Noticing if the heart feels like there are walls around, if there are edges to where the heart ends. All is welcome and all is well, exactly as it is. And however your heart is in this moment, inviting in your own source of inspiration and love, and offering love to your heart. This magnet, this energy center that loves so much, offering love to it now. Each breath, breathing in this love into the heart. And feeling that nourishment like a hug. And allowing the sound of the singing bowl to continue that warmth of love as the sound envelops the self. Maybe lengthening the breath now. Gently blinking the eyes open. And welcome to Spiraling Within. My name is Pei-Ling Lee, and here we spiral within the present moment together. And I'm so happy to be joined by our wonderful guest this week. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Lyn, and I am here.
Yes, Lyn, you are here, I am here, we are here. Wherever here is, the all-encompassing here. And Lyn, we first met, actually, I don't know if we were in kindergarten together.
I was
I,
not in the CLIP program in
oh my
kindergarten. I
gosh,
didn't
when did
join
you
until first
join?
grade.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Fun
Yeah,
fact. So the
yeah.
CLIP program is it Cupertino or is it Chinese?
I
Cu-
think it's Chinese language immersion program.
Chinese language immersion program, but it was based in Cupertino. And that is the program that we were in through 8th grade, where we were doing bilingual Mandarin immersion education. And yeah, so it's actually 20 years since kindergarten started, at least for me. But we
Yeah.
reconnected very recently because I very unexpectedly, just in a zoomed out perspective of my life, it surprised me that I organized this reunion, but I organized this clip reunion for us this summer, and Lynn, you came and we got to reconnect, and it was so nice and so fun.
It was great. I think it came at a really, I think, fitting time in my life. I think I was also going through a space of like reflection, and I was talking to like other people, like people that I'm just newly encountering in my life. And I think something that was kind of reoccurring, it was like, oh, like I am talking about my past a lot as just kind of like a reference point to give myself, I think, just to see like how far I've come and like how much I've changed and like how much has remained the same. And I think brains are kind of like that, like wanting to rework things and just want like this idea of control that like, you know, maybe if we could like think about something that's happened in the past and like if we had just composed ourselves differently, like would the outcome have been different? And I think recently I'd gotten to a spot in my life where I was like, you know what, it actually really doesn't matter. Like I can accept that maybe at that, well, not maybe, definitely at that age, there was a lot of things that I was having a hard time understanding, but now I can be very grateful for those experiences, mostly because I think it's added depth, understanding, I think definitely compassion towards other people, which when I was that small, I'm not thinking about how this painful experience can, you know, be transformed
Yeah.
into compassion for others later. But I really went into that experience that you organized just so excited to meet everyone. Like all of those feelings of just like from hurt to resentment to understanding to like acceptance to just like landing in a place of curiosity and just being like any of like the hurt that I'm holding on to, I have to remember that we were so small that it just doesn't make sense to have beef with an 8-year-old. Like I had to keep reminding
Yeah.
myself that. And then just also like flipping it around and just being like it, not only were they 8, it was everybody else like 8 years old. 8 is just like the random number that is like coming to my mind right now. But like I had to just think about it. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't be like the only one who had to have been experiencing those feelings alone, that we were all separately encountering really hard things, and with varying levels of support. But when we're that small, so we don't necessarily have the vocabulary or the tools to communicate what it is that we're going through.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a really good point of, I mean, I just resonate with everything that you've just shared. But what was so wonderful and really healing about that experience was that, at least for me, it was very healing. It was both this kind of moment in time that ended up being this reflection point of, look how far each of us have grown and evolved over this 20-year span of time. And also, even the fact that we were gathering once more, and it was just all in this space of kindness. Like there's just warmth and kindness and love and just like celebration and excitement to just connect with each other, which is, even that alone was like healing for all of my elementary to middle school selves. It's like little 8-year-old Pei-Ling who maybe felt isolated, or like other people thought she was a teacher's pet or didn't want to be your friend, or all of the things, right? It's like, but now with those same people, and even, you know, that same group of people, the fact that we're just like playing ball together and we're just like enjoying each other's company in a really genuine way. And it's like childhood, at least my experience of elementary to middle school, or really just 0 to 20 for me, I call it human boot camp, because there's so much. Yeah, I really call it human boot camp because there's, at least for me and my soul's journey, I came in not remembering who I am. So it's been a journey for me in the past few years of remembering essentially the light and the love that we all are. But I came through, and there's this term called the veil of illusion, which some people talk about, or it's a common term in talking about like incarnating in a human experience. It's almost like you go through this veil and everyone is born having forgotten their inherent, like forgotten who they are, forgotten their inherent connection with love and source and divinity and all these things. And then it's the journey of the human experience. And that's that seeking energy. It's just like that energy of constantly seeking something. Maybe you begin by seeking outside of yourself, and then maybe you turn to seeking within yourself, but this searching for something, and you might not even know what you're searching for. But in my experience, whether you're searching through the form of travel and you're looking for this sense of home or belonging or love, it's like that searching to connect with the essence of who you are, which in my experience is just love. And so experiencing quite complex human social dynamics in the setting of a school, like even going to school and being around so many different energies every single day, plus you're in this like, your mind is being activated constantly from all of the expectations and pressures depending on what type of school environment you're in, but there's just a lot of stimulation. It's like a very like, I can't imagine going into a school environment right now. Like even just like be in to be in like an elementary school, or to be an elementary school child, there's such a capacity to like withstand a lot of just experience. That's why it's boot camp. It's like this really intense kind of condensed charging catalytic experience. And yes, there's profound growth that we experience in that. And that's kind of the point of school, I think, it's to support us in our growth, literally through childhood. And it offers so much that is just beyond, like when I'm even recalling childhood right now, or elementary school, and getting to like go to school together, so much of what has stuck, has nothing to do with the content in the classroom. It's like the social dynamics. It's learning how to be human and doing the best we can in learning how to be human, and then also learning what is it to be in a physical body? Like what is it to be in this human body as it changes and evolves, and then also while you're around all these other beings that are learning to be human the best way they can too. And there's just a lot going on.
It's insane. Something that you had said that like really stuck with me was just remembering how to be ourselves. And just like something that I just have been playing around with is like how movement has really allowed me to remember that I'm just this vessel experiencing things, that everything's really transient. And movement and flow and play. I think it really started with play. And I think play is probably the most accessible form of flow. Like when you're really small, like that level of concentration and just being really present in a moment. Like, I think that is maybe something that I've been kind of chasing for a very long time, not really understanding that that's what I was chasing, was really wanting to be in the present moment and kind of creating from there. This week I came across the idea of balance, and how balance is kind of like an illusion, because it's like at least when balance comes to my mind, it's like this static thing. It's like it's perfect. It's a place to go to and to stay there. But I think of like me, if like as a person, like I don't like when things just kind of stay the same. Like I think there's like a part of all of us that just enjoys chaos and enjoys like not like maybe danger all the time, but like our brains kind of like when there's a little bit of surprise. And I think the nice thing about flow is that like when you're in a state of just like receiving and stuff like that, there's just like so much opportunity. It's just like, yeah, that's what I have to say about
Absolutely.
movement.
Well, there's an electricity and a sparkiness. Like as you were describing it, it's just I see kind of like little energy beams that are just like all these pockets of potential, like literally, what's it called? Potential energy. And then within that, there's all these spontaneous bursts of creation. And then our willingness as bodies to experience that and then let those sparks travel through us. And it's interesting because this week my focus has really been on stabilizing. And so it's kind of similar in the balance, because the past couple years, through school, really being in this state of discipline, like intense self-discipline and like rigidity and structure, and really holding on to those things. And then after graduating college, just swinging to the other end, and really allowing myself to be in a flow, like to live in flow state and really connect with, because there's a disconnection from the structure of external systems that I have been kind of plugged into. So there's an unplugging, and then for me, it was the remembering of, okay, what are my body's natural rhythms? How does my soul like to flow? Connecting with that, and then creating now routine and structure that supports my system in an authentic way that is true and unique to my specific system. But that's that like beautiful balance between the archetypal energies of yin and yang, or masculine and feminine within each of us. It's the container as well as the water that is inside. It's like we are the river and we are the river bed. Like the bed and the edges of the river that is holding and letting the flow. It's not a stagnant thing either, because the water of the river, as the stream runs, it carves out different shapes in that as well, but it is still held and supported so that the flow can flow. And we are this entire ecosystem within us as well. And so I totally resonate with what you're saying about balance. Is it's not this necessarily stagnant arrival point. Mm-hmm. It's just the beingness. Yeah, it's just like the beingness in wherever you are.
Yeah, I'm there's so many things that I want to talk about now. Like I think of dance as like a really great example of I think what you said about keeping with structure and like respecting our internal flow. And what I love so much about dance is that it really encourages each person to be within their own bodies and really feel a movement. And then with taking dance classes, what can be so frustrating and awesome about taking a dance class is that we're incorporating somebody else's movement, like how they feel within their own body, and then translating it with what we know about how our body feels, and wanting to get it, not necessarily look the same, but like embody it, right? Because everyone's body moves differently, and stuff like that. A teacher that comes to mind is Chris Martin, because I've been taking classes with him on Monday, and he moves as if he's like breathing, It's very much like natural, organic movement. And I think what I thought was dancing, and then after seeing him dance, I was like, well, of course that's dance, right? Because dance only is like hearing something and feeling compelled to translate it within your own body. It's not necessarily like, oh, like this TikTok move, like that is dancing.
Yeah.
But I love the challenge of embodying both, like be like feeling, but also giving myself like a container that like this is where we're gonna stop, and like this is a movement that you want to aim for every single time you hear that sound. And it's been really nice because I've really been able to surprise myself and like what I've been able to discover and like what I've been able to feel, and just feeling differently has been really important for me. I think getting into the sort of work of like, you know, shadow work and understanding and like just returning back to ourselves and remembering who we are. I was in this really stuck place. Like I can only think about like stuckness and like and like how trauma can make you feel like whatever you're feeling right now is just all you're ever going to be and all you're ever going to feel. And feeling it enough kind of convinced me that life only existed within like maybe these three feelings and these things that I do, and that's just who I am. And anything different so posed a threat to the way that I was already living. And even though I didn't like it at that time, I felt so married to, I think, the life that I had built for myself. And I think I was receiving like all these messages from like, I had TikTok, right? The things that I was reading and the media that I was consuming. And like tend to do, and your thoughts and what you do, we are creatures of habit. Like what you're doing right now, you'll most likely stay that way for the rest of your life if you keep doing that. And I was taking inventory of my life, and I was like, these are the things that I'm doing, these are the thoughts that I'm thinking, and I was like, oh my god, like no wonder I'm so unhappy. I'm kind of cycling through like these really unpleasant, like I had an unpleasant routine. I was engaging in activities that weren't really fulfilling or enriching or making me feel excited about being alive. And I had to really sit with myself and ask questions like, what did I want to do? And kind of excavating myself from that stuckness. I think what got it started for me was movement and play. And now I get really excited to pivot and go from like one state to another, like emotionally, physically, just the pivoting, like that is what excites me, because now I can understand that like these feelings that I was feeling before, they're not bad feelings. That's part of like my experience as a person. But I definitely, it is a cause for warning when I was feeling stuck and like I couldn't not just be in that state. Like it's really important for me to be able to experience other things. It's allowed me to connect and be better, but that pivoting. Pivoting.
Oh my gosh, what beautiful reflection. And I say reflection both in terms of your own reflecting on your own inner experience, and also what you get to reflect like in sharing for me and then for everyone experiencing this as well. It's like even just the entire time that you were going, I was like, oh yeah, there was just so many things that were sparking. And even like one thing, just the inventory of our lives. It's like what a healthy and helpful thing for us to even just do and have the willingness and courage to do. Because there's courage involved in honestly taking inventory of our lives, of like what thoughts are running through our minds, what emotional state. And that's kind of that skill and practice of being the neutral, just compassionate curiosity. I love that, because it's like just being curious about what's happening, and even curious or just noticing if there's judgment of what's happening as well, because that's also just an energy. And that stuckness, it's like what you described was your journey of self-awareness. Like there's such self-awareness in even being able to notice that you are stuck. Like, because there's a you that is noticing the stuckness, and the one that is noticing the stuckness isn't actually stuck, if that makes sense. It's like the stuckness
totally.
is there. Yeah, the stuckness is there, and then you're noticing the stuckness. So you know that you're not only the stuckness. If you can see the stuckness, you're not only the stuckness. If you can see your thoughts, you're not only your thoughts. Yeah. And the beautiful part of that is that then that is that through line to remembering, oh, who are you actually? And for me, what's helpful is remembering that whatever is arising in my experience, I'm not only that. It is a part that, for me, I choose to welcome, because rather than resist against whatever the present moment is offering, welcoming that, and then remembering I'm not just this. It's, I don't know why I see anemone, sea urchin. Oh, yeah, a sea urchin. A sea urchin. I don't know why a sea urchin is popping up in my mind, but like, imagine like a sea urchin in the bottom of the ocean, this like compact, spiky little thing. That I'm not just the sea urchin, I'm the entire freaking ocean, and all of the flow and the flavors within that, all the creatures, all the different states of being. But when you're in that sea urchin stuckness, that's the trauma. Like if you're in that and you're believing and identifying with it, right? That's that looping cycle of being like, this is the only thing, this is, and you said something else that really resonated, of just that idea of what you do is who you are, and that, or even it's like the who you tell yourself you are and how you show up and how you live your life, that being who you are. And all of those levels, for me, anything that we could tell ourselves we are, any way we could identify ourselves, any way that we live or behave in the world, those are always going to just be a part of who we are. Like those are always just a part, because that's coming from the lens of, you know, the ego or the consciousness or the human experience, really. And for me, it's like the human experience is still only a part of the infinite beingness that I am and that I believe and experience that we all are. So from that lens, it's like we are infinitely able to expand and zoom out of this experience and be like, okay, this is just a part. This is just, I'm not only this. I'm not only even this one human life. I'm not only a Pei-Ling. And that is a way that I connect with, it's like an inner resource. That skill to kind of be aware, to zoom out, to just observe whatever is present and to choose to love it. And then the other cool thing is when we zoom out, like you said, pivot. It's like I can be like, okay, I've been living as a sea urchin. I want to be a freaking dolphin. I want to play and I want to beep, beep, beep with my friends and stuff. That's my dolphin noise. I don't know if dolphins do beep, 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 but...
That's funny.
Yeah, but like, I want to be a dolphin. And I love when you were talking about dance and Chris Martin and that idea of almost like putting on somebody else's intuitive movement, like him breathing and then these motions and shapes that come of him listening and tuning into his body and also his lineage of movement, and then putting that on within your own body and being like, okay, how does how does this now interact and alchemize with my system? And then what magic comes of that? It reminds me of yoga. Since I practice and teach yoga, one of the things is like there are all these postures, right? There are all these asanas. Asana is the movement part of yoga. And we have all these unique bodies. There are billions of bodies that are all different. And these one, like warrior one or something, or like forward fold, these shapes that can seem like these boxes or containers. They offer like a structure, but ultimately it's not necessarily about fitting the body into a shape that has been prescribed, but allowing that conversation and dialogue to be a conversation and a dialogue. It's like I am in dialogue with a specific shape or a specific posture every time I enter it. So if I'm doing a sun salutation, my body and my entire system is in dialogue with that sequence of poses. And it's not about me getting the pose to be a certain way. And there may be certain, like I may be working towards straightening my legs and whatnot, or that type of, there might be a progression or an evolution of how I'm interacting with a posture, because each posture, just like each movement, offers medicine. Like it offers medicine, and that's what's happening in the interaction. But it also reminds me of like tarot, for example, or just oracle cards. But really tarot is helpful because it's another set of, kind of like a standardized set of archetypal energies. And then if you pull a tarot card or encounter a tarot card or encounter that energy, it's like my system, my soul in dialogue with that energy. And neither are stagnant, but that it's kind of like having an anchor or a reference point. Like the structure is like this anchor to then interact with.
Yeah. I love that. I was thinking of because I do yoga with Adrian, because it's what I can.
Yeah.
It's how I can incorporate yoga. There's a video where she mentions about like when we are doing still movements, how can we incorporate like movement.
Mm-hmm.
How we're breathing and just like where is the energy gravitating towards, like that sense of movement and the stillness. And then how can we like, you know, close. How can we not close in, but tighten up and be still, and like movements that require us to, you know, move through it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How can we be anchored and stuff like that? I think what comes to mind for me is decisiveness and intention. I would say it's not the antithesis, but it's very complementary to, I think, intuition and kind of following where we feel, but then giving ourselves like a landing point to aim for. And I think that is just a sweet spot. I think that is the secret to flow. If we can marry our intuition with intention, I think we could really surprise ourselves in like what we're able to experience and how much more the world kind of opens up a bit.
Totally. Absolutely. And synonyms for all that you're describing to me, like as you're saying this, because I very much experience things from a like unity perspective, or just like, you know, the idea of duality and unity. It's like we have this energy, whether it is the moon and the sun, or masculine and feminine, yin yang. And it's when both of those two things come together and we have that inner union within ourselves in each moment, and we can play with the dynamics of that energy, because one energy is within the other. Like, I love that example of the movement within the stillness, because there's movement in stillness and there is stillness within movement. And that's kind of that dance of balance. It's if I'm in this really potentially chaotic motion, what is it to feel stable in my core? And if I'm in this really still posture, what is it to allow the breath to continue flowing so that I'm not clenched? And it's both of those things, but I love that intuition and intention. How do you experience both those things?
How do I experience
Like,
it?
what is how do you experience your intuition within your body? And how do you experience intention?
I think an image that comes to mind was like during quarantine, I didn't like feeling just like I'm sitting in my room and I'm stuck. And I had like this image of myself running, but I just hated it. Like I hated it at that point. Like I was not ready to run. It didn't feel good. And I was like, okay, let's just do 1% closer. Let's just walk around outside. And it was just like seeing this image of myself just running really, really fast and then coming back and just being like, I can't do it. And then feeling really frustrated with just like how I saw myself and where I was right now, like seeing that distance was like, don't run. Maybe like we'll do something else that feels less icky. And rollerblading has really helped me, I think, marry intention with intuition, just because like the movement of it is so fluid. Once I got really comfortable with that movement, I started playing around with like, well, if I reached over here, like where does my body fall? If I aim to do this with my feet, like, where do I end up going? And getting a habit of just kind of finding really small things to aim for and then accomplishing at that same moment really helped me build the confidence to do other things. And running, like I like to run. Like I love the feeling when I can hit my stride and like I'm not thinking of anything else. I'm just enjoying the movement of myself going, because it's a simple enough movement, I think. But sometimes like in the morning I'm kind of rusty. I'm just like, okay, I'm like something feel right, and then I hit my stride and it's like, yes, I'm doing it. And it's so satisfying because I think back to that moment where I'm like walking through Golden Gate Park and just like really kicking myself, because like I'd start and stop, like I'd start running for a little bit and it would get too uncomfortable and I'd get really upset and I'd stop. But that image of myself like running kept bothering me until because I feel like my body knew what it was capable of doing. I just wasn't there yet. And yeah, like running, and then dance classes I feel like is just a really great container for me to keep practicing intuition and intentionality, like or taking a workout class in the morning. Like I like going in, it's not like I'm arguing with my teacher where it's like, well, I'm not gonna do this. Like I definitely could argue with them if I wanted to, but there's something really powerful about like letting go of like what I think I'm going to feel when I am doing something uncomfortable and then just going for it. And it's just so awesome because I really don't know how I'm going to experience something, because I am going after something new and different. But my brain wants to think like, oh, you're going to feel this way when you're doing this, and just kind of like letting go of whatever expectation of how the experience is going to be and falling into it. That is what is great. So there's that, and then there's like the intention. They both do fun things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so relatable. The mind just anticipating discomfort and then the mind doing what it's programmed to do, which is protect us from potential discomfort. and then want us to avoid discomfort. But then when we're able to recognize those patterns and be like, okay, well, actually, if I look back at all these times where I tried new things and I didn't die, that I actually discovered something brand new and it was really fun, kind of like holding the mind by the hand and being like, we can do it. And it's funny that running comes up, and first of all, just love the 1%. Like, I love that that's a mantra or something that is helpful for you, just like that framework, because it's like baby steps. Somebody, when I was having lots of visions over the past year of me performing on stage, singing songs that I've written on stage, and just like singing to crowds that were like singing my songs back with me, and like people who were like moved to tears with my music and like all this type of stuff, right? And it's funny because right before we started recording, I turned on my keyboard and I just started playing Don't Know Why by Norah Jones, which is a song that I keep returning to. And yeah, it's so great. And even just having this moment of reflection and being like, wow, look how this song is now muscle memoried in my fingers and I can just play it. And I remember just to like 6 months ago when because I did a couple months of keyboard lessons, which is when I learned how to play it on the piano. And the first ever time that I played Don't Know Why, or that intro for my first ever audience, which was just my mom, and how incredible, like how far I've come since then, but how incredible it was for me to even like take that 1% baby step at that time, to like let my voice be heard by somebody else, and to just like step into, in a very safe and comfortable way, this element of performance, which has been something that I've always kind of like your vision of running super fast. It's like me being visible, whether it's on stage, speaking like this, like all of these things have been an element that I know are part of me and how I'm here to serve. But the fear of being seen, the fear of like being in the spotlight, and then to just like over the course of this year take these little 1% steps, and now I'm just like recording podcasts left and right, and just like enjoying actually being visible or singing in front of people. And I've gotten to, and sometimes it's like the things unfold, our visions, the image doesn't necessarily unfold in the way that the mind thinks it might. But in this year, I've gotten to have an experience where I was singing a song for a group and they ended up singing it back with me. And it was so profoundly moving. And then I had another experience where I sang a song for an even bigger group. And then but at the end, there was a woman sobbing who was like so moved and touched by the song that I sang. And like, so I got to manifest and experience those and be like, wow, I'm living my dreams. That's essentially it. It's like, I'm living my dreams, and the more that I connect with that energy of seeing how the thing that I'm dreaming is actually already here, then there's this deep level of just fulfillment and satisfaction and peace. Like, I don't necessarily need to be in Wembley Stadium, because that, even if that might be a vision, the great thing is our visions change. As you were describing that image of you running, the stickiness of these visions, because those are, in my experience, a way that we are being intuitively guided. That's like life, the universe, our soul speaking to us through these images or visions of our manifested potential in the physical plane. And there's a stickiness because it resonates. There's something because that image might not stick in a different human's experience. Like, not everybody shares that same desire to like sprint or to be on stage. Different people have different dreams. And it's, what's that? The phrase that having your dream haunt you kind of comes up. But it's like that idea of it continuing to continue. It's like continuing to be nudged in or invited in a certain direction. And then the intention part that's like the grounding it in the physical plane, because
Yeah.
dreams can live in the dream world, and that's where I've been really focused on this year is what are those like grounding everything in action, like inspired action in the physical plane, because those are the baby steps that then bring that dream into lived experience as well.
But that makes me to get to the root of like what it is that I want and what I desire. And I've also kind of been around with like if I want something, that means it's not already in, or it's not something that I'm feeling right now. So it means like I have to go out and kind of make it happen for me, because these wants and desires are like specific to me and are cluing me in on like what I require to be at my optimal self. What was it that I was going to say? Yeah, an exercise that I've been playing around with is like, how do I want to feel? And a feeling that I was playing around with was satisfaction. And it's like, okay, well, what does satisfaction require? It's like, well, it requires that I do something difficult. And like, that is something that I've been really like struggling with, because it was just like, well, I don't want to do something difficult. But then like knowing that I wanted to feel satisfied with myself and not being able to feel satisfied with myself was just so crushing. So I started picking smaller things that I like. It was just so impossibly like, if I didn't do it, like it was just because I didn't want to. It had to be really easy, and like cooking meals for myself and being like, wow, I feel satisfied, and like really enjoying that feeling of satisfaction, and then kind of expanding across over there. I don't know why I wanted to share that, but
well, there's something that comes up like that. Have you ever experienced satisfaction when things have been easy? Like, it sounds like you ended up just doing things that were easy and then tapping into the satisfaction from accomplishing or completing that easy thing. Or from even in the process of it, right?
Yeah, I think I remember how I wanted to connect what I was saying with what you said, but like it's manifesting. I think it's figuring out what you want to feel, and then finding something, a container, an activity, an intention, whatever it is, to get you to that place of feeling the way that you want to feel. And I think that's what I wanted to get at, is that like you had a vision as to like how you wanted to feel when you were creating music, and you had like these visions as to like how it would feel when it would happen, and it clued you in when it was happening, because it's like you already knew how it was going to feel, so you could easily recognize it. Whereas I think I was going about it all wrong, where it was like I couldn't feel this unless it met my requirements of how it was supposed to feel. So when you brought up the comparison of like Wembley Stadium, it's like you could very easily also be, playing Wembley Stadium, but not feeling the way that you had felt in those situations where it was intimate and close and like all of that good stuff. And I think I was going about it backwards, where it's like in order to feel what I wanted to feel, I felt like it had to look a certain way. And I didn't realize feeling the way that I wanted to feel was actually far more accessible to me. And so when like parts of like, I guess what I desire end up falling into my lap, it feels that much better, because it's like, I already know how I want to feel in those situations. It's happening right now. It didn't have to happen, and yet it happened. It feels great.
Yeah, I love that point of highlighting the recognition, because that is in like manifesting consciously, really, because we're all manifesting whether we are conscious or unconscious. Like all the experience that we are each experiencing has been manifested by us as just creators of our experience. But consciously manifesting, one of the first things really is it's tapping into the feeling state, the felt sense of not actually attaching to what it looks like externally or really the details, but how are you looking to feel in that? And then realizing that however you're looking to feel, like what you just said about it being, those feelings being accessible to you, you can actually gift yourself that experience of feeling those things now, and you don't actually have to wait until you've quote unquote accomplished the thing. And so how profound that is you get to actually be, it's really a gift to yourself. You get to give yourself that feeling state. So for example, one of the things that came up, I loved what you said something also about essentially like receiving the feedback of when we have wants and needs and desires, that is like information really. And something that was coming up a couple months ago of someone that I was hanging out with was that I desire hugs. Like something that like I want and need and desire, some part of me, is a hug. And it's not actually about anybody else fulfilling that desire for me, or even that, I don't know where that last statement goes, but the feeling of a hug for me is nourishment and love. It's like that I want to feel nourished and loved and held and supported. And I can just hug myself at any moment, and I do that often, and give myself that gift of feeling nourished. But that is also what then sparked a lot of this revelation of what intentions I would be setting around what are, like, taking that inventory of my life and seeing the ways that I wasn't actually nourishing my physical body in the way that my physical body was calling to be nourished. And so then it's like, am I just even on a base level willing to shift and make changes in my life intentionally and intuitively to support the nourishment of my body? Like, am I just willing to do that? And by doing that, by first connecting with realizing, even if, like, because the journey of changing, like the journey of changing habits and changing routines and changing all these things, which is a continual journey and just like this human experience. But even for me, like, I've had the intention of, like, there's this one like repeated behavioral pattern that has come up, which is if there's emotional stress or overwhelm, or I'm just like in an environment where other people are stressed, or my energy gets really like excited, one of the ways that my system has been habitually grounding is by binge eating like sugary foods and just kind of being on this just eating as a way of grounding my energy and my body and my system. And so that's been something that I've intended to shift and been on this journey of like shifting and changing for a hot minute now. And for me, it always, like any change, it begins with my internal energy. Like, it's what you said about decisiveness is so powerful. It's like my choice to change. It's like I am choosing to complete this pattern. I'm choosing to like deactivate this program and just like release that within myself, and just truly committing to that. And then the way that that unfolds has an ebb and flow in the physical realm. Like, there are times where, you know, we just ebb and we flow, but that is it begins with that like internal state and that intention. Because even in those times where I'm like, have gotten to experience over these past months, like, oh, I already decided, why is this behavior still playing out? I can hold myself with compassion and like self-forgiveness and just self-love, and recognizing that even if it seems like I'm doing the quote unquote wrong thing, or even if it seems like I'm going against myself, that this is just one baby step in the journey. Like, this, it's not the end, and it's not even the beginning, but it's like, that's kind of, oh, it's interesting. As I'm tuning into that energy now of just like being in a state, like last night I was like eating all this popcorn, watching TV. And that was a moment of me kind of, my version of being in, allowing that quote unquote stuck energy, that sea urchin energy to play out. It's like I'm a sea urchin and I know full well that I'm being a sea urchin right now. That's what it's like. It's, yes. Like me last night eating the popcorn, I was like, I'm being a sea urchin. I recognize I'm doing this. I'm aware that I'm making this choice and I'm making this choice anyway. And just gonna love myself through it and also enjoy it. I'm gonna enjoy the friggin' pop. I'm gonna enjoy the experience because I get to have this experience. And then, you know what? Life keeps going on, but that doesn't invalidate the choice. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. All of those different stories, it's kind of like the journey of, and this is something I played with or I found more helpful over the past couple of years, but just that idea of in any expansion there's contraction. Like when giving birth, for example, right, there are contractions. There are contractions that happen, and that is what dilate the cervix so that the baby can come out. And so in that journey of like, as we expand and evolve, there are these fluctuations, these moments of contraction. And that's not a sign that anything is going awry.
Yeah, that was really hard for me to understand, was like, as I felt like growing and expanding my tool kit. Whenever I would return to a state that felt familiar, I would freak out. I was like, I'm regressing. All of this work, all this stuff that I've been learning and practicing, like, oh no, it's gone to waste because I'm back here again. And having to remind myself that returning back here again is always going to be inevitable, and that's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing because like that, like expansion feels great, especially after like, you know, whatever period of like contraction we may be going through. But like both of those experiences have to exist. Like it, otherwise nothing happens, right? Like it, like that's growth. Like when I think about like a tree, it's doing the same thing over and over again. It's like pushing out new leaves all the time. That process, like a tree is not like, well, I've already pushed out one leaf, no need to do it again. It's like a tree feels compelled to do this all the time. It's like grabbing nutrients, growing a leaf, growing a piece of fruit. Like I think about people, I think about trees and plants, I think people are fortunate that we get to like pick up ourselves and move ourselves to a different environment. And I think that plays into the decisiveness, is figuring out which environments we want to be in, what do we want to experience in these environments, and like questioning if like the environment that we're currently is optimal. Maybe there is another environment that can offer us something different and allow us to experience something different. And that is what I've been really concentrated on just recently. It's like, how can I put myself in experiences where I'm allowed to expand and be different, feel different, and by doing so I feel like I give myself a sense of agency, because now I have choice. I've seen, you know, like I know what this is because I've been doing this, and now I'm experiencing something else. I can either choose to keep pursuing this, I can go back over here, maybe go off in this direction, but now I've already experienced this, so I know that's there, and maybe I can, you know, at some point incorporate it into this and just keep going off in different directions. But it's like the same process, right? It's like, oh, like opportunity to grow in this direction, like am I going to take it? Like what is this going to offer me and teach me about myself?
Yeah, I love the tree thing, and what was coming up as you were talking about the trees is I really love the analogy that an apple tree is growing apples. Like, the apple tree is being an apple tree. The apple tree isn't trying to be a pineapple. Like the apple isn't trying to be a pineapple. Like, the orange is not trying to be the, like, kiwi. Like, the bok choy is the bok choy. And because there can be that dissonance when, if I'm Pei-Ling, but I'm trying to be a different human. I am, like, in environments, or I'm playing out programming of trying to manipulate or change my inherent essence. Or it's like changing what and that's where the language of, like, shoulds and coulds and, oh, but only if, and da-da-da, I don't know, that type of language for me, whenever I notice it pop up in my awareness, I'm like, okay, that provides information for me of who is speaking. Like, if there's a should, then that for me is likely some type of programmed expectation within me, or just like conditioning or external expectations that I'm like internalizing. And I choose to be Pei-Ling. Really just very simply, like, and that going full circle to what we were talking about of remembering who we are, it's like, I just want to be the most Pei-Ling that Pei-Ling is here to be.
Yeah.
And, like, celebrating you being the most Lyn that you are. And then also that, I think, around the language of, like, optimization, I think I've been embracing, like, re-embracing the idea of self, even as I say it in my mind, the word self-improvement, like, I'm like, it's like, for me right now. But that was very much where I was coming from when I was, like, in high school and college, and reading books like The Power of Habit and stuff like that. Because for me, what feels nourishing for me is coming from wholeness. It's like coming from the remembrance and the wholeness that I'm already complete, and I'm actually, as much as the mind might be experiencing this moment as being suboptimal or out of alignment or imbalanced, that as I zoom out to the wholeness of just everything, I remember that exactly what I'm experiencing right now is exactly what I'm meant to be experiencing. Like, me eating the popcorn last night, as I zoom out, it's like, okay, yeah, that's exactly what was meant to be happening, because that experience is offering me something. I love what you were saying about expansion and contraction, because contraction can feel great too. Like, contraction can feel great, and contraction can support us and, like, build up all this momentum and tension and rocket fuel that then expands. Since I've been, like, exercising and actually running this week as well, it's like, that is and that's why I haven't really exercised for the past, like, year and consistently, and really been doing more things like yoga and qigong. But to actually, like, exercise the muscles, there's, like, contraction in the muscles to grow the muscles, and, like, that's just part of it. And whether it is challenging or painful or anything like that is up to us. Like, in the sense of, I can be experiencing muscle burn, and there is the direct physical sensation, but I've been experiencing it with so much more flow and ease, like, because that's what feels good for me, is to just be like, okay, I'm enjoying even this sensation that may seem like part of my mind is going, like, alarm bells and saying this is uncomfortable. But there's the satisfaction as well of being kind of like, I think what you were talking about earlier, of the satisfaction of being like, wow, look, I'm going beyond the limitations that my mind thinks it is true for my body or for this system or for my moment. And so it's like, and I love celebrating. I love the energy of, like, celebration and celebrating even those tiny 1% steps, because those are massive. Like, that is literally has the ripple effect across our entire lives and across everything. So yeah, that's all just me spiraling around whatever we were. Those are just some thoughts.
I liked it. I liked it. I think what gravitated me towards like um, yoga is I think how accessible it is. It's just really being with your body. Like even the mat is optional. And I don't think about it a lot, but I remember when you had mentioned that when it comes to like asanas and movement, these are shapes that like people before us had taken, and there's an understanding that like these shapes have a function and do something within us. And I think part of me is excited about learning more about how these shapes and like just ourselves and our bodies, like our bodies are our tools, and just learning how to work with our tools is just always great. But I've also been a little bit sad that I don't think like I have a very firm understanding of like, you know, how we are connected to our environment. Like I feel like I'm in this place where like I'm very curious about how me existing affects my environment, and how does my environment respond to me, and like the relationship between that, and how it can start with something as simple as like yoga and tuning in and just like the movement of trees and like how we breathe in and out. Like it's the same. Like I'm saying this as I'm looking out the window, and I'm seeing like the tree outside just kind of responding to like wind. It's
Absolutely. And that interconnectedness, I think for me, the understanding can, I mean, depending on who's speaking or, you know, what understanding means to you. For me, understanding can often be speaking to or from the mind level, like intellectual understanding. And what really kind of unlocks things for me is when I have an embodied experience of like an embodied somatic understanding, like an energetic felt sense in my core and my bones understanding of anything, of any concept or thing, potentially abstract thing, that then it's like, oh wow, I actually experienced that directly within my sensations. And with the interconnectedness, one thing that's so cool, as you were speaking about, just like, and I think it really comes from just noticing and observing. And the more that we notice things, the more that we then notice them. And one of the things that really sparked and catalyzed all of my spiritual remembrance and my remembrance of our interconnectedness with all things was the time, like looking at repeated patterns of numbers. And I don't know have you ever noticed like 3:33 on the clock, or like 11:11?
Oh, totally. That was I remember just being so satisfied. Like I remember when it was 11:11, 2011, and it was 11:11, and like I was like, I'm gonna make a wish, and it's gonna be the best ever. And it just itches the part of like our brain that is just like, it's settled. It's a little
Absolutely.
Wink.
Yes, it is. Oh my gosh, I love that. One of my friends calls it universe winks. It's a little universe wink. And when I first, because the number that when I was first even noticing that I was noticing numbers, it was 4:44, and I was kept seeing 4:44 on the clock. And this was around the fall of 2019. And at that time, I had befriended my first ever like spiritual friend. Like he was actually spiritual in his daily life. Like he had crystals in his room and he pulled tarot cards every day. Like I just hadn't had any friends like that before. And I remember mentioning this to him because whenever I saw that, and this is where there's a lot of programming around things like bad luck, bad omens, black magic, all these things. There's a lot of stuff around all those areas. And whenever I saw 444, because it in Chinese is unlucky, like it's like you're gonna die. And so I was like, every time I saw 444 on the clock, I was like, oh no, it's like a death omen. I was like, it's a death omen. And then I mentioned this to my friend, and he was like, oh, those are actually angel numbers. And so I was like, angel numbers? And I Googled it, and turns out when you Google things, there's like a whole bunch of just people writing about angel numbers and just synchronicities and how seeing repeated numbers and repeated times on the clock, it is, we can experience it in an infinite number of ways. But for me, the fundamental shift was, rather than this being this death omen, it was like, oh my gosh, there's a magical moment with the universe. Or just the idea that like my angels or guides or spirit team, that I'm just loved and seen and supported. And so then the cool thing is, and this is where, because I think something that I think in us chatting that I've noticed in your approach to life that I love is you have a very willingness to experiment. It's like you run these experiments within yourself, or just like you offer yourself these little like invitations of, what about this? And let me just like do this, and this kind of willingness to experiment with life. And it's kind of like these repeated numbers, or really just synchronicities in general, became this trail of breadcrumbs that I was leaving myself, and a way that my intuition was communicating to me as well. And so as I followed the breadcrumbs, I found myself having incredible experiences. Like even on Yelp reviews, like I saw the way that I connected with my hypnotherapist in San Francisco was she had 44 Yelp reviews. And I saw that and I was like, done, that's it. And then I booked it, and it was beautiful. And it really, what's cool is that it totally decreases the amount of mental processing that I need to do. Like my mind doesn't have to think. And so it's absolutely entirely possible to live a beautiful, fruitful life without a lot of thought, like intellectual kind of analytical thought.
Oh my gosh.
Because it's like all the information is there. It's like all the guidance is there. And it's that, for me, it's the level of trust, because I've followed these breadcrumbs and chosen to follow the breadcrumbs and gotten to experience all the magical ways that, encountering different people, or I wouldn't have seen this hummingbird if da-da-da-da-da. It's like all of these things that weave together my experience of life in a really magical way allows me to continue trusting and choosing to live my life that way.
Oh my gosh.
And it's fun. Yeah.
Can I just speak on the fact that it's like we don't have to think a lot in order to live a fulfilled life? Because I think that is where I was running into so much resistance, because I felt like, if I just do the right things, I'm just going to spend some time, just run these scenarios in my head, and then I'm just going to do the right thing, and then the thing that I want is going to happen. And I think what I wasn't realizing, all that time and energy that I was like putting into like thinking and like, what is it? Like, it's like when you're anticipating danger, or like I'd run these scenarios in my head, and I would also be like anticipating like some sort of like bad scenario. So I'd be like preparing myself for that.
Yeah.
Just as a way to make myself feel safe. And
absolutely.
Then, I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to gather real information and experience that could inform me of more that I wanted to be doing. And I realized that like so much of my suffering was because I wasn't allowing myself to do what I wanted to do. Like I could have been better off just doing more. And yes, there's definitely times where it's like taking time to like sit, reflect, and like think is like so valuable. But I was using my thinking as a substitute of just encountering and experiencing and being with life and being with people. Like I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but something that I've noticed, and it's nothing wrong with people who do this, because I've definitely been there, but like there have been times where I've been in the company of people and I could just hear them thinking, not like not hear their thoughts, but just like I could feel them not be with me because they're in their mind, and it's like it's such a lonely, isolating feeling because it's like there's this missed opportunity to experience something together. But even though they're in the physical space with me and they could be talking to me with me right now, the fact that there's like this separation between us because they're thinking, it really takes away from the experience. And like when I noticed, I was like, okay, I something that I really care about is presence, and something that I'm going to practice is like, regardless of like how much I may want to think my way out of an experience, I'm going to do my best to offer the people in my life that I choose to be with my presence, and cultivating that and cultivating presence in whatever I do, because it feels great. And it also took some time to recognize like what is presence, how, like, am I present now, like what does it feel like am I present now, and the way that I know that I'm present is when I feel concentrated on just giving and just letting whatever experience happen. I think very often I can be very judgmental and feel reluctant to share on things because there's this feeling like, there's going to be some miscommunication happening and people might not receive you in the way that you might be intending, and that's scary. So it's better to just not engage and retract. And sometimes like I'll feel like that and I'm just like, you know what, that's what I'm going to embody today. But most times I really want to offer myself, and I think by doing so I hopefully give other people the permission to feel like they don't have to encounter life perfectly. Like going back on plants, there isn't a perfect tree, it just is. It's just sprouting out leaves in whatever direction, shape, or form it can.
Yeah. Oh, you touched on so many beautiful things in that. And I think the last thing about presence, well, the last thing was about the plants. And I mean, I guess that's how I've like changed my relationship with perfection, is that, you know, I believe everything is already divinely perfect exactly as it is, regardless of the mind's definition of perfection or perfection looking a certain way. But that idea of presence, of how do I know that I'm actually present, something that I notice, and I think just anchoring it in this direct experience of right now of being in conversation with you, it's like, or with anyone, something that I notice in especially like longer form conversations is sometimes the mind, I think in the past, the mind wanted to grasp and grip. It's like, it's like I need to make sure I'm getting everything that she's saying kind of thing. Like I need to make sure that I'm following, and there's a lot of like, even as I just activate that energy, there's a lot of just like forebrain, just trying to be, that idea of trying to be, it's like trying to be present or trying to be focused, and how exhausting, and like that's, for me, that's like an unsustainable state of being. And it also, there can be judgment that comes up of I should be able to just like, my mind should be engaged. But actually, for me, presence is much more holistic than that. It's like, first of all, I'm physically present, which even just being physically present and showing up is massive to anything. It's like just being physically present, it's like we're already present. And then whatever the mind is doing, it's like trusting that the sound and the transmission of what you're sharing and of your presence, that is actually just washing over me entirely. Because there's so much that is happening unconsciously and subconsciously that our mind is not actively like consciously doing. We're receiving all these infinite signals and transmissions and energies all the time. And so my system actually already is masterfully receiving and processing and integrating all these signals without my mind trying to grip and actually be present. And so it's like trusting that, oh yeah, I'm actually already present and I can just relax. That's really what it is. It's like I just in those times, you know, when your focus just kind of blurs a bit, or even your eyesight, just like everything just goes a little bit softer. And it's like, what is it like if I actually just let it be softer? Like let the mind be soft and let the mind be blurry and trust that I'm receiving. Because then, and going back to what you were saying about the anticipating, it's like my mind would dress rehearse or preemptively be like, the number of conversations with people that I've dress rehearsed before, which I don't do anymore, but I would. It's like, oh yeah, you know, like even something like this, right? And I like people who are guests on this, like everyone has a different relationship with this type of, you know, just conversation or like a podcast episode or what may be, you know, an interview or something like that. And that possibility of, okay, I know that I'm going to be on this conversation with Pei-Ling. Let me dress rehearse what I'm going to say. Let me dress rehearse how I'm going to introduce myself. Let me and anticipate that in order to project a certain thing, in order for me, really, because all of that mind is so that the mind can feel safe in this now moment. Anything that I'm dress rehearsing about the future is so that I can feel comfortable and safe right now. Oh, yeah. And that goes back to, I loved what you were just, that observation of being in physical space with someone, sharing physical space, and that isolating feeling of feeling like really you're on different wavelengths. Yeah. It's in whatever form, or that you can, because you are aware of or practiced in observing the mind. Because as we observe and begin to become aware of things within ourselves, we then are more able to observe that in others as well. Like that's absolutely what happened to me. It was like, as I became to identify and really hang out with the programming of my mind, when I am experiencing other people, there's familiarity in how their mind is functioning. And that's the beauty of just like the human ego, and that there's a universality in terms of what we experience. And so that's been a whole journey for me of increasing my capacity and tolerance to be around other humans. Because there was a point where it's like, as I'm in this process of deprogramming, there was this kind of like, if you're just in the process of changing a habit or behavior, like if you're looking to change an addictive pattern. So for example, if I wanted to like where am I going? I know where it's like, I feel like I know. Yeah, it's like removing the stimuli. And so there was a certain point as my sensitivity was increasing, because I was just becoming more sensitive to my own experience of life. There were certain people or situations or environments I couldn't be in or chose not to be in because they were activating the exact patterns that I was looking to shift or change. Yeah. And so it was like me stabilizing in the new groove or the supportive behavior, the supportive pattern or way of being, really, and strengthen in my self-conviction, really, in some sense. It's like strengthen in my experience of being myself, so that when I am around other people who may be living from the mind or maybe in a certain energy, that I can stay feeling connected and nourished, even if, because as you were talking also, the image that came up for me was, I used to, in conversation with people, because quality time is like one of my numero uno love languages, and anytime somebody would pull out their phone, like, oh my God, pull out their phone, or just like respond to a text, I literally, it's like my entire system would shut down and my mind would almost like, I would literally just stop talking and wait until they would look at me until I continued talking. And there would be a real feeling of, of like, I'm not worthy of your attention, or just feeling of disrespect, or whatever the feeling was. And now it goes back to what we were talking about, of the giving ourselves the gift of feeling how we desire to feel. And because I know what feels nourishing and loving to me is to feel connected, even if somebody seems to be disconnecting. That's really it. If somebody seems to be disconnecting with me, can I remember that even if they seem to be disconnecting, that we're already connected? And what helps me is like remembering that, like on a higher self, like etheric plane level, like on an essence level, that separation itself is an illusion, that we're actually not isolated. Even if, for example, my mom seems to be on her phone or something, I know that she loves me and I love her, and that we're intimately, infinitely connected, even if in that moment there's something else. And so that kind of multidimensional perspective is what helps me feel that I am connected, even if other people are living from the mind or disconnecting in some other way, is that I can just choose to feel connected regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you were speaking about like removing yourself from like the context, which was, activating like this sequence and programming that you wanted to distance yourself from, like I completely related. Like, I think as I was understanding more about myself and just like processing, like this is what I was doing to other people, I kind of like was, taking inventory again. It was just like, like if this is what I'm doing to other people, like also like who are the people that am I around with that are encouraging me to, keep doing this? And there was a period of like resentment that I was going through. I was like, oh, do they even realize that like when they do this, like I'm going to respond this way? But also taking like a sense of personal responsibility. It's like, you know what? No, regardless of how other people are, like whatever they're going through, that's specifically a them thing. Like I feel determined to, cultivate these feelings and cultivate presence and cultivate like compassion. Like every time I kept hitting a block where it was just like, I would maybe encounter a person or a thing where it's just like, oh, they're a jerk. And so I am not going to embody the thing that I said I was going to cultivate. I had to ask myself, it's like, well, are they really being a jerk? Or is this maybe like the extent of where like my understanding and compassion is? And is there anything that I can do to kind of maybe inch it a little bit more so I can still embody those things that I am determined to embody? Because it can be really scary. Like there have been so many like contexts and situations and people where I felt so helpless. Like I think back in like college, because I had no understanding of like how to navigate those things. I constantly felt like things were happening to me, and I didn't have any sense of grounding, and realizing that like I can return back to myself, ground myself, and like I can keep going through situations without the fear of them like overtaking me completely. Like that has been really helpful, because then I give other people the space, to navigate and be themselves, and I can still be compassionate and understanding towards them and still get to be myself.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, just the grounding within yourself, like that's such a, and each of us will have different pathways of doing that, and even different pathways maybe on different days, but that is, it's kind of like returning to 0 point, to returning to a state of neutrality. It's returning to the home within yourself, like the sanctuary of yourself. And that's like our ultimate resource. Because then when we're connected to that, it's like taking a shower. It's like we're
totally.
washing off anything that has happened, and then we're just coming back home to ourselves. And that's why like meditation like is such a powerful thing in whatever form that meditation takes, because it's just one container or way, it's one pathway of returning to the self. And even what's coming up right now is like sometimes, like I love the car, like I'm so grateful to have a cars to drive, like be in a car and to drive a car, like because a car can be such a, it's like this compact vessel, this compact container. And before going into a space or after having left a space, like I'll just hang out parked outside the house before entering the house, because currently I'm staying with my parents. But after whatever experiences that I've had when I've been out or in the day, like just having a moment to just center myself before re-entering another environment, or say you like arrive somewhere and you're about to like walk into a party or walk into a situation, it's like having that moment with the self to just come to the baseline and remember that that is always a place you can return to, because you have all these tools and all these like things that you, ways that you know how to return to yourself. And each of us intuitively, like we have all that wisdom and that guidance within us to do so. There was something else that you were saying that was great. Well, there were lots of things, but that's what was coming up for me.
Now I'm like replaying. Oh, a phrase that I was trying to grasp for that just came to me now is risk assessment. That's what I was doing when I was like playing out. Myself.
Yeah, that is a thing.
Yeah.
That is a thing.
It's a tool. I think it's a tool that I overly relied on, but I think that's like the great thing about like when we go through life. It's kind of like a video game. You're picking up new tools, you're refining the ones that you have.
Yeah.
We're allowing ourselves more choice. We can, switch things out, upgrade them. Try
and remembering that we can, like, remembering that we can reprogram our experience, we can change our toolbox, we can upgrade our tools and things like that. I really appreciate you framing the risk assessment as a tool, because my systems programming, like my mind, around things like analysis and risk, like all of that kind of has a flavor of the mental realm, just like the mind. And it's kind of like I chose to live without thought, and I've been in it's like a healing relation. I've like a healing my relationship with the mind and with the intellect and with analysis and all these things, because living from solely that place for 20 something years, it was like that led me to intense exhaustion and burnout. And so it's kind of like for me within my own self, forgiving the mind and the mental realm, and also just welcoming it exactly as it is, because that's what it's programmed to do, and I can reprogram it, and that it's a skill, it's a tool. Like being able to do something like a risk assessment, being able to assess, analyze, play out different mental scenarios, that's actually and that's where the power of the imagination comes in, and like the way that we can actually consciously co-create our experience with the mind and let the mind actually support us in all of those things. And yeah, so that was just what was coming up for me because that idea of risk, it's like, what is actually being risked in what is the risk of any scenario? It's like, for me, like, yeah, well, the risk is what we know, or the risk is that we'll leave what we'll know.
Yeah, kind of that. It's like the risk is like there is everything that like leading up to that moment, we have to kind of give it up and kind of jump into this different thing. So everything leading up into that moment is kind of like at risk because that's our understanding.
Oh, that's like totally not where my mind was with risk.
Oh.
My mind was but that's, yeah. Well, and that's kind of really, I think something that you said at the beginning was being married or attached to the way that your life was, and the risk was giving up the familiar in order to shit, like the unknown of like what your life might look like if you change. And I think what comes up for me was then I was thinking about the spotlight, like my patterning of which even that, like even me saying my patterning, like that is something that I am aware of as that self-identification or ownership of a certain experience. Like it's a both and. It's like, yes, and I hold that lightly because it's not my patterning, it's just patterning that I just happen to be experiencing and do. So that's like just a little asterisk. But that spotlight, like the risk that is present in experiencing discomfort or potential discomfort is, if I go down to the roots, it's like, okay, well, it's discomfort, but ultimately it's like, or humiliation, it's rejection, it's death. Like the risk is like ultimately, oftentimes for my mind, the mind, it's death. And I'm so grateful that over the past couple years, I've really become friends with death, like within how I relate to just mortality and like human life and all these types of things. But I'm so grateful that death doesn't scare me. Like, yeah. And not that I can choose to not be activated in fear while also respecting life, if that makes sense. That like I can respect and celebrate and have fulfillment in life and death. But the risk, like if my mind is like, okay, this is an unsafe situation because you might be laughed at, or maybe you'll get to the front of doing this thing and then you won't know, your mind will go blank, or all the possible scenarios, and then I'll die. Like that's kind of like, and then I'll die.
Something that I've also been thinking of this week was that the mantra, like, I'm not fully myself until I've been like the opposite of like what I've been. And I think going back to pivoting, embracing like both sides. What example do I want to use when it comes to being the opposite of like what I've been? But like stuckness versus flow, because then I can give myself the opportunity to see both and experience both. Because it's like if I've only ever just done one thing, can I really say that I am that? What is something that I'm thinking of? I had taken a course. It's a course called Alignment by Jojo Diggs, and one of the frameworks that they had offered us was the idea of like a point A, which is like a person, place, or an experience that like when we were younger, we're like, oh, I never want to be like this. Usually it's coming from like a place of like, oh, this person hurt me, and they hurt me by being like really authoritative and like not wanting to understand me. So like I'm just only going to embody understanding and compassion and like rooting for the underdog, and I will never be angry. And I think for a long time I didn't know how to embody anger. I like shied away from anger. Like I swallowed anger, and I didn't understand anger. I was very afraid of anger. Because I'd witnessed firsthand like what uncontrolled anger could do. And then I guess with the understanding, like, okay, emotions are information. They're telling me something about myself, and that's something that is worth being curious about. And so I've been being more embracing of anger and kind of understanding it. But now it's like what you said about co-creating an experience. Like when it does come up for me, now it's like I can have a space to respond. It's like instead of feeling like, defaulting to like not being angry all the time, like I can sit here with anger and be like, how do I want to respond to my anger? Like I know how to be angry, and I know how to like contain it in a way where I'm responding and expressing what I need without it being so destructive and standing in that anger. Or I can just be like, I'm angry and I actually don't really want to pursue that right now. That doesn't really feel like something that I want to do, but I accept it and I see it and I'm angry. But I feel like before, I was always stuck in this place of like, oh, can't be angry. Like I feel angry, but I can't. So that is how I wanted to express the idea that like I can be fully who I am until I've experienced both.
Yeah, and that it's like, it's so powerful and it's so true as well, because we as humans, as any being, we have the capacity for the full spectrum of everything. And because we are in this dualistic experience where there is light and dark or light and shadow, there's both, there's daytime and there's nighttime, and we can experience both, and experiencing the nighttime offers us contrast so that we understand the daytime better because we've experienced the nighttime, and we understand it in a different way. And that spaciousness that you were talking about, like, is such a wonderful thing to highlight as well, that's really what awareness and all this curiosity or shifting your perspective or zooming out, it's creating spaciousness so that there is that moment of pause between when something arises and when you react, so that you can choose with your conscious awareness how you respond. And there's also the level of just like being in flow state where you're kind of just like flowing with it, and you're not necessarily being like, I am choosing to do this, but you're just riding the current. But being the fullness of yourself, what comes up is that, and I was having this conversation earlier this week as well about the idea of, for example, being biracial and then being half white and then half Asian, or any kind of, I mean, it's a pretty physical example, but someone that I was speaking to was talking about how within their genetics, they contain both the colonizer and the colonized. And what is that? What is that? Because it's like this literal duality within the self of the oppressor and the oppressed, the bully and the bullied, the perpetrator and the victim, all of these things. And to say that we are only one is actually not often true. We're both of those things. And at least I can, and that goes back to the personal responsibility thing. I think all of us in this human experience have had an example where something we have said or done, another person has experienced and felt hurt. Because it's like, we've sparked hurt or a sensation of being hurt or pain in somebody else, and we've experienced being on the other side of that. Like, we have these kind of flip-flop experiences where I have, from one lens, harmed myself and been harmed. It's like both of those things are constantly happening. And going back to what you were saying of expanding compassion to even the person who, I think you said somebody being a jerk or like that type of example. but can I even have compassion and love for the part of me that was the one that what's one of the parts of myself that, or this energy that I like to name as like the fierce inner lioness. It's like, and she has a bite. Like this idea of having this fierceness within me that can bite. And say I've bitten someone energetically, or just like, I've snapped verbally. There's pain there's pain and there's fear and there's all these things that arise when that happens. And if that dynamic plays out of being the one to snap or being the one to like, quote unquote, cause harm. And can I love even that part? Recognizing that she was showing up in the way that was the best she knew how, most likely out of fear, out of protection, out of love. And also, can I tend to and care and love the part that feels like it's been harmed? Like within myself, the can I love even the Pei-Ling that was eating popcorn?
Yeah.
And the Pei-Ling that feels the after effects of having eaten that popcorn. Like both of those things. Yeah. And recognizing that that's like, there's love, and because it has arisen in my experience, because it's here, that I then choose how I relate to those parts, whether they are manifesting within me or in the world around me. Mm-hmm. Even just in the world, any type of dynamic that's playing out. And what feels good and nourishing and flowy for me is to meet all of it with love and compassion. That doesn't necessarily mean it's permitting the behavior to continue or just like sitting back or resting, right? But there's a difference between approaching something with compassion and awareness and love, and also just like self-forgiveness and all of these different things. But that's what comes up.
Yeah. That reminds me of like internal family systems therapy.
I love internal family systems therapy so much. Parts work is my jam. It's my jam.
Well, like the first time I actually like used that framework, it was about a year ago. I was like in Oahu, and I was visiting a friend, and for the first few days they were a terrific host. They remained a terrific host throughout the experience I was there, but there was times where like at that time she was in a new relationship, and like like the excitement of like a new relationship, you're getting to know somebody, you want to spend time with them. And so there's a time where it's just like it was work, and then she was going to spend time with her boyfriend, and I was like, oh, like what am I going to do? And I was feeling all these feelings. I was feeling abandoned, I was feeling frustrated, and I felt lost, and like I felt like nervous about how the rest of my day was going to go. Like there was an event that I had heard of when I was there about like a roller skating event, and I knew I wanted to incorporate that in my day, but it required like figuring out how to get there from her house, and it was like reading up on like the bus system, and I was sitting there, and it was hot, and I was tired, and like all these feelings were coming up for me, and it was like, okay, like let's name it, like how old are you? And it's like, well, I'm 4. Like I'm 4. And like, what's the situation? It's like, well, this feels like when I was 4 and my mom was dragging me over to an errand, and we're at the bus stop, and I was confused. I was like, I don't even know where we're going, and I want to be with my friends, but I can't hang out with my friends right now because I'm with my mom, and my mom doesn't even really want to hang out with me because she's concentrated about like where she needs to go. So I'm just sitting here on this hot bus, and I just feel abandoned. And what's the lie that we're telling ourselves here? It's like, well, I'm not worthy of like connection. I'm not worthy of like being with other people. Like I'm not worth other people's time. And like, for example, my friend's not hanging out with me right now. She can't take me to this event. Like, it must be true. And then I was like, okay, well, that's the lie. Like, that's not true. Like, there's so many examples where she was spending time with you, and like now she's, you know, spending time with somebody else, but that doesn't detract from the fact that like we are friends, we have this connection, she cares about me. She just has other things to do. So it's like, okay, like, we're gonna break this lie. How are we going to break this lie? It's like, well, I break the lie that I am not worthy of connection, and that I'm easy to abandon. And it's like, okay, so like, how are we going to, like, what would be the opposite of that? Like, how would you feel if you were worthy of connection and friendship? And I was like, well, I'd probably feel confident and like receptive and excited to meet new people. And so I was doing like this, like I was kind of going through this framework as I was sitting on my bus ride over to the event. And it was crazy because like I entered that event just being like, okay, I'm going to embody openness. Like, I'm going to be ready to receive all these people that I'm going to meet. Like, I'm going to meet new people, and I'm going to be excited to meet them. And it was crazy because I did make new friends at the end of that event, and throughout my stay in Oahu, even though like my friend couldn't be with me the entire time, like there was stuff for me to do. Like, I was being invited out to do things and eat dinner and and spend time with like these new friends that I had met from this roller skating event. And I think about like, had I not given myself the space and opportunity to like process what I was feeling and then enter that experience with the excitement to meet other people, like the rest of my trip would have probably played out exactly how I thought it was going to be, which was like, I was going to feel abandoned, and then I'd have nothing to do, and I'd be stuck, and like, which is what my brain was used to feeling. But when I offered it an alternative, I had like this whole entire new experience.
Oh my gosh, I'm like in round of applause. That is just such like wonderful, amazing modeling of that inner dialogue with your mind, and how we can dialogue, create that space and process. Like, that was such great. That was just yay, because it's so helpful to actually hear through like an example of a situation in a scenario. And also that it's one thing to know what to do, or it's one thing to like even have a toolkit. And then it's another thing to actually be like, you know what, I'm gonna actually call upon this tool. I'm gonna take this tool out of the kit, and I'm going to apply it in my actual lived, I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna apply it in my lived experience. And it's so cool that you took out this tool, applied it while on the bus ride, and then got to see how, well, really, you were like totally shifting your energy. And that was just like one tool that was helping you be with this energy that you could have stayed in the frequency of. Because like you said, if you didn't process, or if you just kind of stayed hanging out and experiencing from that energy, which if instead you were like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling these things, let me just like suppress, let me just ignore, suppress, avoid, then subconsciously that energy is still ruminating, and actually it's amplifying because it's getting your attention. And the way that it gets your attention to be processed is by being reflected in the world around us too. So it'll present, like the universe, life will present these opportunities that actually aggravate or activate that unprocessed energy or emotion, right? So that you then eventually be with it. But it's kind of like nipping the bud early. It's like you, as soon as the thing arises, as it arises in the present moment, creating the space within yourself to be with it, and then you are able to shift out of the sea urchin, remember that you're the ocean, and you can choose to be the dolphin, you can choose to be the whale, and then we'll get to experience how that changed the frequency from which you were resonating, and so the experiences you were attracting were reflecting that instead. Just how cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that because it was something that I had pulled from like TikTok, like internal family systems therapy, and I was just so curious about like how are these videos, like how can they actually be applied to my everyday life? And it was that was like the turning point where I was like, oh shoot, like really what I'm interacting with has the potential to really influence how I interact with the world. And I was just like, wow, I have so much responsibility towards myself and everything that I do.
Oh, well, this feels like a beautiful place to shift to our final little portion where I just like to open it up and offer you the opportunity, Lyn, to speak to whoever is joining us, watching, listening, and if there's anything that you feel inspired to share.
I want to think about this. I guess what I would like to invite everybody to try out and experiment with is how can we invite more just movement and flow into our lives. I think something that I want to challenge is that life should be full of resistance and it should be hard and it needs to be conquered. Like, I think it's okay to follow opportunities that come easy to us. I think that's just like the way of nature, right? Like,
path of least resistance.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think there's anything bad about that. So I would like to invite everybody who's listening to chew on that. Think about that a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Lyn. Oh, this has been so fun.
This was so much fun.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody watching and listening and being with us here. We are here. Just like we began, we are here, and we are still here, and we'll continue to be here. And yay, take care.
Thank you. See ya.